you become so comfortable in the coping of whatever the trauma was in your life. And I don't know how much I've talked about this on the air here, so let me go ahead and say it now. I went through physical and emotional abuse as a teenager from 14 until 17 and a half when I went off to college. I could not wait to get out the door and go to college. I literally graduated high school, Vivica, and less than a week later, I was in a classroom in summer school college class. Just I could not wait to get. I had to bolt. But like over the years, I have noticed so many patterns that I did as a coping mechanism, and I never loved myself. The self-love piece of this conversation is the critical one. If you guys don't take anything else from this, and I'm sure you'll agree, Vivica, you got to start loving yourself as much as you love your mama, if you love your mama. Because I think we are our own worst enemies most of the time.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jamie. And, you know, I feel like at some level, all of us are carrying trauma at this point. You know, there are different levels of trauma. I have been going deep into researching what does it mean? What does it look like? What is trauma? And I found, if I can share a resource that you might already have or with the readers, but there is a book about CPTSD. And oh my God, I forgot the author. Bad brain.
Slow down. CBTSD, is that what you said?
CPTSD. It's like PTSD, but it's called complex PTSD.
Okay.
And learning about complex PTSD for me was like that, aha moment.
So for the people that don't know, post-traumatic stress syndrome. All right, keep going.
Thank you. So it's complex post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Got it.
And what is that? So we are familiar or somewhat familiar with PTSD that usually is like combat PTSD, rape PTSD. It comes in a car accident. It's a stress syndrome that comes from a big event that was traumatic and it will influence your life, right?
Like what Tiger Woods is going through right now.
I don't follow the news, so I'm sorry.
He's a famous golfer that just got in a really bad accident. Yeah, and he broke his leg. Anyway, he has a lot of CPTSD right now.
Well, CPTSD is a little different because it's not from just one event, but it's from a consistent series of repeating events that span through times, and they usually layer up and overlap. And so this is where those coping mechanisms come from that you mentioned several times during a conversation. But it's usually CPTSD is formed in childhood and, up to like 18, 20 years of age. We can still continue to add on to it. But then at a certain point, there is a crucial phase, like from 0 to like 14, where our personality forms these coping mechanisms, protectors, and it kind of funnels in different compartments. So there are different ways of reacting, and we can span across all of them, but usually we take on one or the other. So for example, we know the fight, flight, freeze mechanism. And so in CPTSD, there is fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Right.
The coping mechanisms, and they become personality traits, really, of how we cope with that trauma. So for one person might become the freeze person, that whenever you go into confrontation with the person, they become the deer in the headlight, and they cannot like talk back, cannot have a conversation. They're just like freezing literally, and they need to remove themselves or just stay there and like blank out. Another person can be the fight person, and they will like attack you basically right away. These are all defense mechanisms on how we cope with that trauma that was originally done to us. So the book CPTSD, I'll get you the author eventually, and I might even remember it, but it explains all these mechanisms and how they act in life, they function in our lives. And it's really amazing to see how like 99 of the stuff that we do and say might come from a trauma pattern.
Whoa. What was that a percentage you said?
Well, it's my own kind of thought. It's like if I look at myself, and this is not a statistic or a study, this is just self-reflection. It's like 99 of the stuff that comes out of my mouth, my thoughts, my actions, it's a trauma pattern.
Talk about that a little more, because I agree with you. I'm sure it's a very high percentage. I don't know how you would quantify it, but for me, I found even before I started doing the internal work, then when I started doing it, I'm like, who is Jimmy? Like I had to like figure out who I really am when you let all that trauma stuff go. So what did you notice?
Well, the first really important one is like my dynamic with people. And, it's really interesting because like I consider myself a good people person, right? Like I am outspoken. I am like, I'm not super shy. I can relate to people. I have a lot of diverse experiences. But then that's like kind of the very surface. And that's also a coping mechanism, is a survival mechanism, because I left home at 18, just like you. As soon as high school was done, choom, out of there. And I lived in 5 different countries and traveled, and I hate saying that, but people call me a survivor because I went through so much. And, so I had to be able to relate to other people. It was a question of survival. But then is where like, where are my boundaries? And that's when you become like an overgiver. So like, or sometimes it's a people pleasing. That's the fawn mechanism, right? So you, you need to please people in order to receive approval, to feel like you belong, because you never felt that in your growing up, and your primary caregivers were not able to support you in that way, or your community. And so you develop this like fawning mechanism where you're like, but then like at a layer deeper, then something else kicks in, which is a protector part. And this comes from internal family systems therapy, which is my favorite.
Yeah.
There are parts that protect us, but there's the same kind of as the coping mechanisms. And that might kick in. Sorry, my computer, I don't know why I can't shut off that dinging thing.
Just trying to remind you that we're having a conversation. We're alive, guys. We're alive. So I'll tell you how mine manifests. It's hard work. I have a work ethic today, and I used to say, oh, well, I must have a hard work ethic because I'm mimicking what I saw from my dad, for example, who owned 3 restaurants when I was a teenager. But no, I was trying to prove to myself and to other people my worth, and my worth was in the work. And even today, I have to fight that tendency to work so hard. Now, I love it because it makes me very productive, and I'm able to get out. I wrote 7 books in 7 years, so highly productive because of it. So not all of these kind of trauma patterns are bad things if you can channel them in the right direction.
Totally. Yeah. And, but again, like you just say, we need to become aware of how they act into our life and where they take us, because like I have that one too, Jimmy, and like I can escape in work, and then like I'm become that high achieving person where like it's one achievement after the other,
Yeah.
hoping that my parents will finally pay attention to me or notice that I exist. My parents didn't come to my graduation. I graduated from college. I put myself through college, one of the best schools of photography. They didn't even come for my graduation. And it's like, okay, what can I do next to show them that I'm lovable, And it just like drives you to like into the ground. But that's the shadow.
At some point, you let that stuff go. I'll tell you what, like I've been a 3-time international best-selling author, and I've made a name for myself, so to speak, online. Do you know, to this day, I've never heard "I'm proud of you" from my dad. He's never acknowledged my accomplishments, and I'm kind of glad he hasn't, because there are a lot of parents that say, oh, look at what I did, infusing all of my work ethic into my son, and da da da. no, MFer, you didn't have anything to do with this. So it's kind of cool, but it's also you want to be acknowledged. And I think a lot of people struggle with this kind of relationship issue, especially with their parents, because of things that happened. And now you're left trying to pick up the pieces of the damage that was done when you were younger.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I gotta say that through this awareness and my work of myself, and like really, like you say, letting go of those things, that has given me the ability to actually have an amazing relationship with my mom.
Okay, good.
And it's transforming and growing, but I just decided, first of all, that I was going to be myself and transparent with her. And I know, I can only share to a certain level with my mom because like I don't want to like information overload her. And I'm not ever blaming her. I used to a lot, but now I see she's just a freaking human like me, doing her best. She had me at 20. She was like a single mom at 20 years old in 1968 in Italy. It was not easy. So I have a lot of compassion now, and I still get angry and frustrated. And that's my ability to acknowledge those emotions and know that they're valid, and it's okay to be angry and frustrated and suffer. But at the same time, I don't directly towards her as like it's all her fault, because like I know that she just did the best she could. And I know that this is part, ultimately for me at this point, is part of our big learning experiment here on earth, and that everything is perfect and source has a bigger plan for us, that the ultimate reason why we have to go through all these trials and initiations and challenges, there is a reason. We are not here just like little like meat puppets, by mistake. And so I think that faith has been really important for me as well, and kind of like regaining this connection to source that I had lost for so many years. I think you share the same as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, I want to infuse something into this conversation because I feel like when you start doing this internal work, Vivica, and you tell me if this is what happened to you, you start going so much deeper and richer and desiring those kinds of relationships in your life that are meaningful, but other people don't do that same work. And so then they look at you and say, oh my gosh, you've changed. And I'm going, you bet I've changed for the better. But people like you the way they remember you, which is a part of these trauma patterns as well. They're used to seeing you as your lesser self. And now you at your higher self, they don't know how to handle you.
No, it's true. But, this is again part of the bigger learning, because you are going to start triggering stuff in people. Just like when you're in your shadow self, you will trigger certain things in people. And then the projections happen and the blaming happens. But also when you're more into your empowered self, more like living your gifts and embodying your gifts, you will still trigger the crap out of people, because in one way or another, we're all here to trigger each other. We're all here to, as long as we have buttons, I always tell my patients, as long as you have buttons, somebody will push them. So in a way, like I really appreciate the view of Buddhism. It's been around for a minute, and it's all about being the witness and detaching. And I feel like there is a lot of value to that, because detaching really kind of smooths out the buttons of trigger, and then they will still be there.
Yeah.
Like, that's one thing I really want to communicate to everybody who's listening. Don't ever make yourself wrong, because after all the work you did, you still get pissed off, you still get angry, you still get sad, you still get hurt. You're human. You're supposed to. All your feelings are just teachers, and we need to honor them as teachers, not reject them, classify them. Oh, you're good because I'm happy now, and that's a good feeling, so I can take it. But no, I'm sad, and that's a bad feeling, so I'm going to cut the piece off and, reject it. Wholeness comes from accepting all our teachers, all our feelings, all the parts of ourselves, all the damaged, rejected, abused, neglected parts of ourselves, and start to bring them in and giving them some love, right? Like you were saying, that self-love piece, that's really big part of our healing, is being able to see all of the big picture